Today I'm going to show you how to work on poured chocolate and Zeoto. The chocolate I am using is compound chocolate. It is from Joann's. I am using the color Plaque. And when you're practicing to do this or wanting to learn how to use Zeoto or chocolate, just use compound chocolate. It's easier to use. You don't have to worry about tempering, and you don't have to worry about getting it hard enough to stencil on it with Zeoto. Now for your stencils, you can print out any design that you want from the computer. You can also use a regular type stencil because Zeoto will not hurt your stencil at all. And you can also use any form of cookie cutter. With cookie cutters, there is a long tip in the kit that makes it easy to get into the grooves if it is large on the edges, or you could flip it upside down also to make it with ease. So for today, I'm going to use just a printed out stencil. Now when you're doing this, just make sure that you get the right size of stencil you want for your design on your poured chocolate. I just took my chocolate, I melted it and got a round cutter and poured it in there and let it dry. In order to hold the stencil or the print, I just placed a couple of ballpoint needles where I need them. 2 is enough because you can also use your hands to support the edges. And I use a tip that is in your regular kit that makes it really super easy to outline stencils and melt your chocolate without ripping the paper or cutting through. And it is this very long thin tip that has an angle at the end and angles like an oval, so it is literally smooth on one side and pointy on the top side. Don't know if you can see that. You'll be able to feel it with your finger. Okay, and I love using this one with paper because it is smooth on the oval side, and when you put it to outline your stencil, it just glides and it does not cut through, as opposed to having one of the tips that has a fine point that could cut through. When you are using Zeoto and a paper stencil on the chocolate, there is no need to push down extremely hard. Make sure you have the right heat. I use between 50 to 80 degrees Celsius. And the reason that I say between those is because it depends also on the temperature and the type of chocolate that you are using. Always start out with the lowest heat and gradually increase until you get the desired heat. And it's really easy to tell when it's burning the chocolate to outline the stencil, because you will start to see the oils or the moisture come up into the paper. If you don't have enough heat and you feel that you're pushing down too hard for it to absorb, then just bump it up to about 80 degrees Celsius. Now I have let my pen warm up for a little bit, and I am just going on the outline of my design. And also I'll come over it once or twice just to make sure that I have covered every area. And also if you move slow, it helps. If you're going to move fast, then maybe I would suggest using higher heat. But I can already feel this burning through the chocolate. If you find it easier to put this on a swivel top, then go ahead and do so. As long as you are comfortable with how you are holding your pen. When you are using a stencil, you can use any tip that you like as long as it's a nice pointed tip so that you can get just a small edge of your stencil. So when you go back and create your dimensions, you have your outline perfectly. And when you're using your heat directly onto the chocolate, you don't need to have your heat as high up as when you're using one of these type of printed out stencils. Now I'm going to just lift up one side to make sure that I have all the outlines there that I need. And they are all there. Just remove your paper stencil or your whatever stencil you're using, and you can see the back of the printed stencil where the chocolate kind of adhered. That's how you can tell. You can see the moisture coming up to the paper, and that way you'll know that the heat is absorbing through without a problem, and it's not even ripped, so you can always use this again if you wanted to. Alright, so I'm going to show you how the outline is there. And this is where you start creating dimensions with your different tips. You come in with thicker tips, with thinner tips, and you start removing the chocolate. Okay, before we get started, I wanted to go over some of the other materials that you will need. You will need vodka. Any grain form of alcohol is perfectly fine. Do not use water because you want it to evaporate from the chocolate when you are cleaning your areas. A simple brush like this that works for you would be perfectly fine as well. Other tools that you will need are silicone tip tools, and you can find these at Hobby Lobby, Joann's, or Michael's in the clay section. Make sure that they are soft and not super hard. You can also find them on Amazon. I also use these sugar shapers, and I love how these work on the chocolate when I am doing additional sculpting and cleaning out areas. So I'm going to start out with my knife tip. And I love the knife tip because it angles into a V, and when I go in to carve out the chocolate for a larger dimension, it gives me a very even line. And my tip is a little bit too hard. I have this at 80. I'm going to let it cool down a little bit. When you're working directly on the chocolate, you do want to have the minimal heat. If you over melt it, it's not going to give you very clean, fine lines as you are sculpting out your design. I'm starting out at 50 degrees Celsius, which is more than what I need. And also, chocolates vary, but you are safe with 50. It is the lowest heat, and you don't need that much. And you can kind of glide your hand and do your own little swirls here and there. Create your own unique design to it. I'm going to let it sit for a little bit before I go in and remove that melted chocolate. I'm going to actually come to the other side. And I'm just kind of give it my own curl at the end. And then what I do is I use my really soft silicone tip. Just come back and follow your design where you engraved with Zeoto and remove the excess chocolate. And I like putting it on this paper because sometimes I can just save these little excess if I need more. Or you can just wipe it on your towel, whichever you like. I kind of put the excess here and then I just wipe my towel, and you can see how beautiful that's starting to look. Okay, I'm going to come back and do the other ones. You can also use any other tip that's in the kit that you feel more comfortable using. I kind of like the knife tip because I have a versatility of having either a thick groove or a thin groove if I were to use the tip. But again, it all depends what type of design you are doing and what is it you'd like to accomplish. Okay, I'm going to let that sit for a little bit, and I'm going to come and clean all the grooves. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is come and remove the excess chocolate like I did with the other ones with my soft tip. And when you carve on the chocolate with Zeoto, sometimes the heat absorbs for a little bit more, so you can do a lot more carving with your sugar shapers since they have harder tips if you wanted to. And we'll do some of that so you can see how it works. Then usually what I do is I dip my brush in a little bit of vodka, kind of dab it so it's not too wet, and I just come over and go over my chocolate where I engraved so it smoothens out all those rough edges and helps clean out any excess chocolate that's in there. Okay, if you can see that. All right, so now this is the tricky part. This is where we start playing with dimensions. I want my petals to have a little bit of life in them. So what I'm going to do is start giving it an edge before I play with the middle. And usually for that, I'll use a tip that is thin, but also this limits me as to how deep I can go in. If you use a very long tip, then you might dig in a little bit deeper than you want to within your chocolate. The first thing I want to do to create a little bit more dimension is go outside the petal and come in a little bit deeper. And you might want some sides to be deeper than others because the petals aren't always even. That way you'll have some that are elevated on one side more than the other. So I kind of slant at an angle and try and give it more groove. Underneath. and just kind of remove the chocolate as much as I can with my tip as I am doing this. You might want to go back and forth a couple of times until you get the perfect dimension. Now this is where the sugar shapers come in and are wonderful to use. I use the angled tip, the smaller side, because it allows me to get perfect removal of chocolate right where I want my dimensions to be a little bit deeper. And I also use it to smoothen out that rough edge on the chocolate so that it blends in and looks a little bit smoother. Okay. I don't know if you can see that. I did a deep groove right there, and you'll start noticing all these things as you are building more dimensions within the petals. And I just basically go around and do it on all the edges. Some I do a little bit deeper than others, only because I really want to give these petals definition. Okay. I'm just going to let it sit there. And you'll do this with all your petals. It is a slow process, but it is very rewarding once you are done. And the more you do it and the more you get used to it, the faster and easier it will be for you. This also helps you learn how to use different tips to achieve different things. Just kind of clean up on the edges. And a lot of these things you can refine towards the end. Once you see it all come together, it is very rewarding. I'm going to clean it up with a little bit of vodka just to smoothen it out while it's still warm. Because it gets a little bit harder if the chocolate has gotten hard to clean up all that excess. Okay. So just continue to do this around all of your petals. And if you notice, I'm holding it at a slant versus right side up. If you hit a little rough patch as I just did, just move your pen a little bit slower and let the chocolate melt. We're ready to remove all that excess. Also, when you're doing this and you're carving out, your chocolate absorbs the heat and it stays hot for a little while. So you can literally carve as much as you want while it's still warm. And you won't damage it at all. It's so easy to work with. Just kind of cleaning up some of these edges. Okay, I'm going to clean it up with a little bit of vodka. Alright, we're almost done. We have a couple more petals, and then we're going to start working with the inner part of the petals. Trying to move a little bit quicker. Take our sugar shaper again, and we just remove all that excess chocolate. Smoothing out the edges. The reason I smoothen out the edges is because when you are carving into it, it kind of leaves it a little bit uneven on the edge, and I like it to blend it in with the base, because when you blend this part in with the base, it just makes the petals jump out even more. You can literally remove as much chocolate as you want. You can use your bigger tip just to get a larger area. And just kind of remove. These are all little scraps of chocolate that you can save. Throw them in a little container so you can remelt it if you want. I'm just coming around and cleaning it all up, making sure that I have all my crevices cleaned out. Okay, and then I'm going to go over it with some vodka, make sure everything is cleaned out, nice and smooth, and there are no residues in those grooves that I created. Alright, now we're going to start working with the middle of the petal and creating dimensions coming out from that end. So you can see how detailed it is now in the chocolate. And if we create dimension here in the middle, it just makes the petals pop out even more. Okay, and for that, I take my little tip that we did underneath, and what I do is I start outlining where I want the edge of my petal to be. And you just slowly stroke the edges and come down. And then just come around the other side and do the same thing. Okay? Now you can leave it like this if you choose to, or you can still remove more, but this is just showing you where I want the outline of my petal to be. And then we're going to get rid of all that chocolate in the middle. You can see I'm already starting to create dimension. Okay, so I'm going to leave that petal the way that it is, and I'm going to go work on the other petals and start doing the same thing. And I noticed that this petal, kind of look at your petals. I noticed that this has like an outer curve here, so I'm going to make it kind of look like it's folding over from the top part. So what you want to do is you want to create your border on the outside here. And then you want to just do a little bit here because we're going to come back with the knife tip and remove the center part to give it that dimensional feel that we want. So I'm just going to remove the chocolate. I can kind of see what I'm doing. And if you notice, I didn't give it a border at the bottom. Right there, I didn't give it a border so that it looks like it's just going downward. And then I have a border up here so it looks like it's folding over. And you kind of play with all your petals and start slowly building all these dimensions in them, and then we come back and we carve in the middle and we start smoothing out the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these, and then we're going to come back and do the centers. All right, we have one more petal left. And I'm just basically drawing the outline of the petals. And this is used as my guide. I'm going to come back and just give it a once over with a little bit of vodka in my brush, just so that I can make sure that all those little residues have been removed. I don't know if you can see that. See how we're starting to create all those dimensions in the chocolate? Okay, I have cleaned up my surface a little bit so I don't have chocolate everywhere, because now we're going to really extract a lot of chocolate and it's going to get kind of messy. So I have my knife tip, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my knife tip I'm just going to start melting the chocolate and pulling it towards the middle part. First on one side, then on the other. And remember, you're not trying to remove the chocolate, you're just melting the middle part. And then you come in with your sugar shaper or your silicone tip tool, and you start to remove the chocolate from the inside. And what you're doing at this point is basically carving and smoothing out the chocolate, and you are forming your petals. And then I like to take the tip that's rounded and kind of smoothen out my chocolate because it is still warm, and it allows me to literally mold the edges the way that I want. It also smoothens out all those little rough patches. If you don't have the sugar shapers, then you can use your soft silicone tips. You can use an angled one if you need to, and kind of work from the sides to the middle. And smoothen out the areas that you want. And I love that these are soft because you can really apply a little bit of pressure on the chocolate and clean up, and it won't damage it. A lot of times if your tips are too hard, you can break those, the rims that you create. So you just want to be gentle with it. Okay. What I want to do is I want to clean out a little bit more of the inner part here. I'm going to put a little bit of vodka on it and kind of clean it up, smoothen it out. And you can see that. And we're just going to do that with all the petals, and you just start shaping them. You don't have to remove all of it. You can actually leave a little bit in the middle to just give it like a slant. You can even work the chocolate to the part of the petal that you don't want to have it too thick or hollow, and just play with it. I mean, see, for this one I want to push out the edge, so I'm smoothing out my chocolate towards that edge, and I'm going to go ahead and remove more on this side. And you can always take your silicone tip or your sugar shaper and smoothen it out a little bit more. And we'll also do it with this one. I'm going to clean it with a little bit of vodka. Alright. Just continue to do the same motion with all your petals until you reach the dimensions that you want and create all the dimensions that you would like inside and outside. Then towards the end, you just come back and you fine tune everything, and we'll do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the petals and then we'll come back and refine everything. So this is where you come back and just fine tune a certain areas, and for that I kind of use my little pointy sharp tip because that allows me to dig in and kind of fine tune like these areas back here behind the petal, just to give it a little bit more depth. In some areas, not all of them. And this is where I use my soft silicone tips because I don't want to break the edge of the petals, but I do want to remove the chocolate. Just to give it a little bit more definition and depth. Give it a little bit more here. Just kind of go around and look at your design and look at your petals and figure out where you want to add more dimension. Just melt the chocolate a little bit with your tip and remove it with your silicone tips or your sugar shapers. And then come back and smoothen it out and make sure that everything is removed with your vodka and your brush. Just about done with all those details. Alright, just make sure you have all that excess chocolate, all those little edges refined. Okay, just come over it with some vodka, dab your brush, kind of remove the excess, and go over everything and just kind of blend it in, smoothen it out. And if you feel like you want to come down a little bit on these edges here that are a little bit elevated, that's where sugar shaper is really great. You just come and you kind of just carve into the chocolate, remove all these little shavings, and kind of just make it all blend in together. And it will also elevate your petals a little bit more. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with it. And clean it up a little bit really quick. And then we're going to do something with the middle, but we're going to do something geared towards Halloween, and we're going to use semi-isomalt. All right. See how that looks a little bit more blended in on the edges? All right. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now we'll go to the next phase, and for the next phase I'm going to use a tip from the new tip collection, and we're going to create some fun with semi-isomalt. Okay, so I thought this would be perfect to put an isomalt eyeball in the middle and kind of give it a little Halloween vibe. So what I did is I took some semi-isomalt, I melted it in my container. I don't know if you could see it here. Some semi-isomalt, I melted it in my container, and I poured it into my little silicone molds here and got the shape of an eyeball. I cleaned my surface because I don't want to get my chocolate onto my eyeball. So I made sure everything is clean, and what I'm doing now is I'm using my 5mm ballpoint tip. This comes in the new tip collection for Zeoto Pen. And what I'm going to do here is kind of melt out the chocolate in the center. Nice round groove. I'm going to kind of push it out to the sides to create a rim. I want to make sure I get it big enough to fit the eyeball in there. Kind of a big eyeball. Let's see if that fits. I think it will. But let's just give it a little bit more. Space so that it falls in there just right. And I don't want to dig out the chocolate because what I'm hoping will happen is the eyeball will sink into there. Let's try this out. And kind of create a little bit of a rim around some of it. And you can always take your soft silicone tool and kind of work it up against it. So it holds it nice in place. All right. I'm happy with how that stayed in there. And now we're going to paint a creepy eyeball. And for this, I want to make it simple. I'm not going to use gel colors or anything. I'm just basically going to use markers with edible ink. There's a whole lot out there that you can select from. I was giving these as a gift, and they work very well because it's a very fine point. So I'm going to use these. And I want to make the eyeball kind of red so it stands out, but I don't want to make it super duper red. So let's see. Let's just give it the outline. Just kind of make it a little creepy. There's so much you could do. You could put little teeth around. Just kind of design it however you feel you want to make it look creepy. I'm just going to kind of do black center. It's not even dry yet, so I'm hoping that it will look all right. Okay. Then we want to give the eye a lid. So what I'm going to use to give the eye a lid is take some modeling chocolate. Cocoa Palm, the brown, the dark brown would work perfect for the eyelid. I have a oval shaped cutter and my little rolling pin. I probably won't need my rolling pin because it's going to be such a small amount. So just want to take a little bit of my modeling chocolate. Alright, so what I'm going to do is kind of just soften up this modeling chocolate a little bit. Okay, I'm going to roll it a little bit here and just cut out a little piece. Touch this out, and let's see how we'll make this work. Kind of just creepy over the eye. It's a little bit too thick. Don't want it that thick. Let's do a little bit less. That's better. Okay, and then we're going to give it a bottom lid. Kind of a little bit less than that. Come down here and stick it. Let's work the eyeball up. Kind of give it some texture. Close it up a teeny bit more. Alright, we are pretty much done with the eyeball. I'm going to come back with a little bit of black and kind of fill in the creases so it looks a little bit creepier and has more texture to it. Just going to go ahead and use my marker and go over it. Let's do the other side. Okay, so I am very happy with how my eyeball looks. I hope that you have enjoyed this quick tutorial on how to use Zeoto on chocolate, how to use printable stencils. You can use any kind of stencils, but I hope that you've enjoyed watching me create dimension on chocolate. And the best part is if you're not happy, you can remelt it and do something else. If you have any questions, please post in the comments and I will answer them. Thank you.